Welcome to Money in the Cloud, where cloud cost management is made simple. The team behind Japan's #1 cloud cost intelligence provider is pulling back the curtain to show you how to turn every dollar and every cloud yen into real business value. In each episode of this series, Alphaus leaders talk with finance experts, platform engineers, and FinOps pioneers to share real business stories, break down the latest tools, and give you practical steps you can use right away. Join us as we help you turn your cloud costs into business wins. In our pilot episode, we explored the regional landscape of FinOps and how ASEAN is navigating its cloud adoption and FinOps journey. For this episode, we're taking a detailed look at how engineering teams build and manage their FinOps practices. What does a real cloud cost management look like from the engineering side? We'll explore everything from team structure and current infrastructure to the day-to-day challenges of balancing innovation speed with cost control. Leading our conversation today, Hajime Hirose, the CEO of Alphaus, and our guest, Ryan Wood, Head of Engineering at ElectroRoute Japan. Hajime and Ryan, the stage is yours.
All right, so let's jump in and ask you a question, Ryan.
Sure. Shoot.
Right. So could you share a bit about your background and how you came to lead engineering at ElectroRoute Japan? Now, I guess now it's a Mitsubishi Corporation now, right?
Yes, we're a fully owned subsidiary of Mitsubishi Shoji. So I actually ended up here in Tokyo because my wife, who I met when I was studying abroad at Tohoku University, is Japanese. After I graduated university, we had tried living in the US for a while and it didn't suit her very well. So I actually got a job with a quantum computing startup over here back in 2019. And through a various sort of meandering path, I wound up getting an engineering management position here at ERJ. And largely in part thanks to the work I've done with Hajime in the past. So kind of thanks to you, I'm in a management role here. So here we are.
All right, great. So Ryan is in Tokyo, Japan, and I'm in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. All right. So in your day-to-day, how does your team connect with the rest of the business, especially when it comes to cost awareness and accountability?
So we have sort of a number of metrics that we have to sort of meet in that space. The biggest deliverable for my team is software. So we have stakeholders all across the business who will come to us with stuff that they want us to build, whether that be for accounting, trading, risk management, any area of the business. I like to say that we're building a trading platform for one customer. It has a number of unique challenges. As far as cost goes, we don't really have as much granularity on that as I'd like. So obviously we do deal with, we are a trading house. So we do energy trading, and that means that the bottom line is the most important thing for us. Like it is for any business, but especially for us because we're just making money off of money, right? So normally you want to get good detail into P&L, and I want to know how much it cost us to make this trade. But the business doesn't really think about things in those terms yet. I would like it if they did. We're trying to get there. And actually, Hajime, that's one of the things that we're relying on you to help us push is this idea of a holistic view of our P&L.
Sure.
But for now, they kind of treat my team as a single line item cost on our monthly P&L, right? So you go through everything, and it's like, oh, here's how much the office cost. Here's how much IT cost, and that's everything I do. Right now, there's not really any awareness on things that we do that affect the bottom line. It's more along the lines of, oh, IT, make this exist, please, or fix this, please, but not so much of, this particular project is too expensive. So we'd like to get there, but we're not there yet.
So I've been heavily focused on FinOps for the last 6 years. But I'd like to ask you, Ryan, so the term FinOps and its concept has been increasingly popular in Japan as well. But when you hear it, what does it mean for you and your team, FinOps?
That's an interesting question because, again, I think this is largely due to the domain we work in. But when you say FinOps to anybody at my company, they think you actually mean sort of financial operations in a more traditional sense. So
All
we have
right.
a FinOps team, and he goes around calculating our P&L for a given projects, things like that. But again, they don't think of it in maybe the more modern term where we've got like, oh, here's a bunch of stuff we do in the cloud, and how do we relate that to given projects? And I think the reason they don't have that yet is they don't have a sense of like how our costs sort of drive that, right? So we do have P&L, or sorry, we do have FinOps, but it's not that FinOps, right? And there's no real like awareness of what that is yet, and we're trying to push it, but it's not it's not there.
Right. So yeah, the FinOps we're talking about is the FinOps times DevOps concept. Bringing the agility of a DevOps with the financial accountability of the finance. But I guess most people, even your company, which is very advanced, most people think it's a financial operation. So operations side of the finance kind of thing, right? But so when it comes to, the FinOps DevOps, um, I guess you are still educating the members.
Yes. And to be fair, there's some inklings of value there. I had a conversation with our head of contracting recently, and we were telling him about the product that we use for our cloud cost management. I said, well, look, wouldn't it be great if we could get an idea of how much it costs, sort of from a cloud perspective, for us to put in a new contract? Like, you guys go out and you talk to all these counterparties, you spend months and months trying to get everything lined up and get all this stuff ready to go. The risk team looks at it, the pricing team looks at it, but you have no idea how much it costs from cloud. And that might be a significant portion of the P&L. You don't know. So, especially since we're trying to move into smaller contracts, like we've got low voltage sites now where you might be going to like a single Lawson and he has rooftop solar, and you say, oh, well, we would love to trade that for you. But when you're doing that, all of a sudden the cloud costs become a more significant portion of the business. And so he was very interested in that. So I think that we're starting to get some awareness, but it's slow going.
Great. Okay. All right. Yeah, I see that you have many challenges, but let me ask you this again. So every organization has its own cloud cost challenges. But when you say what are the biggest ones that you have right now, you're facing right now? Is that the awareness? Is that the cost allocation? What is the biggest challenge right now for you guys?
I'd say the biggest challenge for us, and there's a few of them. Right now, the biggest challenge we're dealing with is sort of these surprise billing events that happen where
Right.
you
Yeah.
get where
Very
like,
common.
yes, and I imagine that everybody has this trouble, right? But and I'm sure everybody's heard this, right? Where, oh, 6 months ago our Redshift bill was $2,000 a month, and now it's $9,000 a month. What happened? I don't know. But we spent probably 2 weeks of our time trying to figure that out. And well, now we know, but like, this stuff happens and you don't really have a good idea of why the bill's going up. It just goes up, and it always seems to just go up. It never goes down. So that's probably our first big issue. The second one, as I mentioned, is sort of, we have a number of components, and I'm sure everybody's like this, where you've got a number of processes. Like, you've got this ETL pipeline that feeds into this database that has a bunch of services that run off of it, and that pushes up some sort of UI that our users work with, right? And each one of these components sort of feeds into that giant cloud cost bucket. And what we would like to be able to do will be to say, oh, well, this system as a whole costs us X dollars a month or Y dollars a month, whatever it is. And then be able to say, hey, trading team, you wanted this system. Here's how much it costs us a month. And here's how much it cost us per trade you made using this system.
Yeah.
How does that look for you guys?
Yeah.
And those are probably the two biggest things. And I think probably a lot of the reason why FinOps is having such a hard time taking off in this country is that there's just that lack of awareness
Right.
around that build. Because like if you're coming from a more traditional sort of mindset where you've got servers, then everything's just capex, right? So
Right.
in that sort of world, maybe you can slip a new application in somewhere, but with cloud, everything you use is really just paid for. So
Sure.
uh,
Sure. So let me qualify what you're talking about. So we need to tie your cloud spending to a business outcome. For example, say you mentioned that, cost bar tray. Is this something that you guys have implemented already or you're working on it?
we're working on it. So right now, the thing we're working towards, mainly based off of our recent spike in Redshift, is figuring out how much Redshift cost we can attribute to each one of our processes. But that kind of
Right.
sort of dovetails really nicely into this overall goal. And we started with tagging, right? So we started with saying, oh, here's every segment of our business. Let's break out the costs by tagging all of our resources. Well, we use Terraform, so that's actually pretty easy to do because it's just code, right? So we have really high levels of tagging across everything. And our cloud cost management tool, Octo, which we use pretty regularly, did a really
Thank
good
you for that.
job of helping. No problem. Helping us break that into cost groups. So now I can see like, oh, this is how much trading ops uses. This is how much risk uses. This is how much FinOps uses. But the issue is that there's so many resources that are just shared across all of our departments that just tagging alone doesn't get you there. So now we're sort of looking at the next level, which is sort of unit economics, where I can go into the usage for example, redshifting and say, oh, here's how much compute each query used over the last month, and here's who did that query. Okay, great. Now I have the tools to say, here's how much compute you should assign to each one of these cost groups. And we can split that cost out that way, which lets us sort of break out another piece of that sort of shared resources and actually make it not be shared anymore. And then the nice thing about that is it's not just about sort of breaking costs out into business segments or departments. I can break them out into individual projects because everybody's kind of got their thing that they want you to do. Well, that everything costs money, right? So if you're telling me that but this big workflow you want saves you, 100 man hours a month, great. It costs $1,000. Is that worth it to you? And it probably is, but it's nice having those metrics because then we can push back on some stuff that maybe isn't as effective from a business perspective.
All right, great. So sounds like you have already implemented infrastructure as a code, and you tag resources through that practice, which is very advanced. I haven't seen many company doing that yet. So you guys are pretty advanced already. So you mentioned about the shared allocating the shared component, right? Share resources. I think many company, especially in Japan, are struggling to allocate the cost for the shared components. And most company, they just divide it by like number of teams. So let's say you have this shared cost, which is let's say 100. They just divide it by 4, which is 25, 25, 25. Would you say that's okay as a first step, or should they invest and I'll try to allocate the cost down to usage?
I mean, that's definitely a good first step, especially if your business has already reached a steady state where, you generally know sort of on the month to month, there might be individual spikes, but usually it's about that level, right? So we had considered doing that here because we were thinking, oh, well, our trading department is probably going to be about 75% of our usage. And then maybe after that, our FinOps department is another 20%. And the rest is
Yeah.
pretty standard. We thought about doing it that way. But when we looked at the data, it didn't really fit for us because the company's still in the growth phase. So we'd have to go back and sort of massage those numbers every month. And we have such a small team that it didn't really make sense for us to do that. But I can understand that if you've got a larger organization and maybe not an organization that's as technically minded as we are, that could be a way to work. Because like maybe you just go into your cloud cost manager, whatever you got, and you say, oh, well here, let me just massage these numbers for last month, and then we'll get a report out. And okay, great, now we're done. Whereas we don't really have the hour that I can spend off of a guy every month to do that. So for us, the automation is more important. And that's a lot of the reason why we've embraced the more advanced tooling.
All right. Okay. So tell us about your team in Japan. How big is it, and how is it structured? I mean, it looks like you have a lot of things going on. I'm assuming you have a big team, or how big is your team?
We do not have a big team. I actually have
You have a big capacity, though.
yes, yes. So we actually have what is it? 4 engineers and
Okay.
myself, and then we have one part-time IT support staff. So my team is almost entirely made up of seniors. That's a bit of an interesting loadout because normally that's not the way businesses work, right? Like you normally say, "Oh, here's your hiring budget. Go hire as many people as you can get." Well, we
Yeah,
kind
you
of
don't
got the
get so
opposite.
lucky to have so many seniors.
No, no, you
Yeah.
don't. We had the
No.
opposite problem where they're like, "Oh, you're not constrained on budget, but you can only hire one person." So, what do you do in that situation? You say, "Well, I'm just gonna find the most expensive senior guy I can get, and we'll hire him." And so we've just got a bunch of heroes, sort of slinging code all day, and they produce a lot of good results for us, which is why we're able to move so fast. But I'd say the other side of it as well is we leverage AI pretty heavily where we have discussions on a semi regular basis about which models we should use and things like that. So we're really sort of at the cutting edge in terms of our tooling.
Okay. And you have a sister team, or you have a team based out of Dublin as well, right?
Yes, yes. Therefore, our sister company, ElectroRoute, in Ireland, they actually work on an entirely different architecture from us, and they have I think 16 people, but
Okay.
they're
Okay.
much less automated
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. They're less automated in terms of FinOps, or just overall?
overall. Yeah, so
Overall.
but they're starting to get this awareness of FinOps as well. So I was talking to their CIO, gosh, a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying that one of the biggest problems he was having was that they still have this tendency to put their IT as a line item as well. And he says that that's not great because it's really difficult for them to say, well, we should switch this off, even though nobody's using it. And he said that if they could attribute costs to individual projects, then it would be easier for them to say, well, you know what? You say you want this, but it's actually costing us X dollars a month. So maybe we should just turn it off. He said that that was a big problem to him. So I actually showed him our dashboards, and he was really impressed with what we had done with just tagging. So I
Good.
expect that they're
Good.
going to be yeah. So
So you
the
showed
awareness
him
is growing.
the Octo dashboards.
Yeah, yeah, I did,
Oh, good.
and they were very impressed with what we had done just with tagging. So I do expect that they will start considering this more heavily in the near future.
All right. I'm so happy to hear that.
Oh, you're
Okay.
quite welcome.
All right. So let me dig in a little bit further. So what does your cloud setup look like? Are you on 100% on AWS or multi-cloud?
We are 100% on AWS for sort of our infrastructure. We do have
Okay.
a Microsoft Azure account, but we use that for Active Directory and SSO and
Okay.
things like that. Although we might be multi-clouding sooner than rather than later because we've got some VPN requirements that we might have to go into Azure for. But for now, yes, we're all on AWS. And we have a multi-account setup as well.
Multi-account. Okay. Okay.
Yes. So we have an AWS organization with OUs, and we actually use Account Factory for Terraform, which is really cool because I could just go and press a button, and all of a sudden we have a new account. And so, like having automation around our cost projections for that is really important because, like, all of a sudden your bill's off by $100 and you don't know why. And you're like, oh, I forgot this account over here that we created.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. How is your architecture like? If you don't mind sharing, or if you're not, if you don't feel like, then it's okay.
Now I can share. So we actually have a shared network. So we use hub and spoke networking. So all of our requests come in through our shared firewall, and then they get directed to the downstream account through a shared VPC,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of that goes through transfer gateways. And we did this because it's more efficient for us to have one firewall because like it just works better for us that way than to have 3 or 4, however many. This also allows us to set up sort of single points where we want to network through, and then have all of our workload accounts be accessible that way. And this is really important because we actually have 3 workload accounts. So I'm sure everybody here who has an engineering background is aware that you should have multiple environments for your work. So we have 3: dev, stage, prod, and each one of those has their own AWS account. So the advantage to that is that all of our resources are essentially independent of each other. I don't have to worry about accidentally breaking the production database because I'm testing a new thing, which is really nice because we break things all the time, and making sure that those don't actually affect the users in production is paramount. So we have a sort of strict development policy that we follow, and UAT is a big part of that. So having separated and isolated environments is huge for us. So in each of those, we are running an RDS serverless database, and then sitting on top of that, we have serverless Redshift as well. And we use these for different purposes. So our RDS kind of operates off of our core business data, that needs transactional data, if you will. So user accounts, finances, things like that, stuff that people need to update or change or needs to be run through applications that have high performance requirements. Redshift operates as our data warehouse, which is where we put all of our time series data, and we have a lot of that. So we're typically, I think we're running at like getting close to a petabyte now on Redshift.
Wow,
So yeah, this
that's
is
a
all
huge
fed.
amount of data.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly you accumulate it, but
Yeah,
it's all necessary, and we make a lot of money off of having the information. It's information is power, right?
sure. Yeah. Data
So
is a power.
yes, exactly. And so we have a number of ETLs that feed into that, and we're looking at investing into Spark and Kafka now because we've been using an ETL platform for a while that doesn't really fit our needs, and it doesn't do real time, which we're getting into, but we haven't started that project just yet. And then sort of off to the side, we have our API services. So we're running microservices on Fargate sitting inside of an ECS cluster. And we're looking at implementing Kubernetes in the near future as well. So I'd say that we're very serverless, which is a bit of a shame because that means we miss out on a lot of the RI benefits, although they do apply to ECS. And AWS is doing a good job at sort of getting those pushed out for serverless as well. They're really trying to push it on their end. But the nice thing about that is we can scale up and down as we need to, and we don't have to worry about sort of implementing new ECS instances or worry about OS migration or anything like that. So, it's I'd say it's a pretty decent workflow. It's very agile, and it can be extended really easily. So it's got some advantages, and it's served us pretty well so far.
All right, thank you. So, what would you say is the main cost driver? Is it Redshift?
Yes, we actually have 2 right now. Redshift is one of them. I think Redshift is about a fourth of our costs. And then the next one after that would be AWS config. And so, for those who don't know, when you work in an enterprise space, one of the biggest things is sort of security compliance. So, the auditors really like to see that you have what is it? What is I think it's NISC. They like to see that you have a high NISC score on, CIS. They want to see a high CIS score on AWS. And so in order to do that, you have to set up AWS config, and config kind of looks at all the resources you have in AWS, and then you pay for that. So I won't go as far as to say it's a conspiracy for AWS to charge enterprises more money, but it certainly feels that way sometimes because that thing is really expensive.
Yeah. All right. So you don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me how much you're spending on the Redshift, but I'm sure you get a lot of questions from finance, right? So let's go back to FinOps. So how do responsibilities shake about between engineering, finance, and operations?
So that's the interesting thing is the finance department, they almost have this sort of apathetic attitude towards our spending. I think they've just accepted that our spending is going to go up and they won't know why, which I
No
don't think they're
question
happy
asked?
about it.
They don't ask questions?
They don't ask questions. They just take one look at the AWS invoice I send them every month and just sigh. They just
Oh, I'm not sure if it's a bad thing. It's a good thing or bad thing.
I don't know. I don't know. I talked to our head of finance, and he's always looking at the numbers, right? And I tell him, well, you know what, Kawasaki, if you want those numbers to go down, like there's an easy way to do that. You just gotta just gotta grease the wheels a little bit. But he doesn't think my jokes are very funny. But they've accept. I think this idea of just IT being a single line item on the budget, where they think, oh, well, we'll just budget a huge amount for IT next year, and then they'll use more than that, and then we'll do it again. And I don't think they really have a realization about like how this cost should be split up. I think they just assume it's a fixed thing. So they don't ask us about it. They complain when we're over budget, and then so it becomes like this sort of intramural fight between us and FinOps, where we're like, but you guys asked us to build all this stuff. And they're like, yes, but you spent too much money doing it. And we say, well, okay, but on what? What do you want us to not build? And so there's not enough data for anybody to really have a decent opinion. So everybody's just mad. And it's not a great place to be honest. So that's one of the reasons why I've been pushing this so much. But I do think that from an operations perspective, people would be interested in having it. They just don't, and they don't think it's possible. So they just kind of accept it right now.
All right. So sounds like they trust you, but you mentioned that they complain when you go over budget, right? So what kind of cost management practice do you have in place? I know that you've been proactively implementing FinOps. Do you practice budgeting, forecasting, or that? What are the things that you guys are trying to do right now?
Yeah, so we do budgeting. We have a yearly budget, and we produce that based off of a forecast over the next year. Before, and to be fair, a lot of this is because we're still in sort of the initial build out and the growth phase of the business. So it's really difficult to sort of get an idea on what the total cost is going to be for a year when you've been around for 2 years, right? So for us, it's been a lot of forecasting and then a lot of assumptions. And the forecasting bit, we've taken the AWS Cost Explorer as one of the inputs, and then we were actually using Octo's forecasting for the other one, and those numbers didn't match at all. So I was sort of taking a middle path between them and saying, okay, so AWS is here, and Octo's up here, so maybe it's somewhere in here, but that's not great because it doesn't factor in any of the work we think we're going to do or we know we're going to do. And so
Right.
we would like to be able to sort of take a more proactive stance where we say, okay, what does my forecast look like if I assume that we have another 3 API services, or our warehouse grows by, another petabyte, or our the number of users we have grows by, 10 or 15 or something like that. Like having knobs that you can turn that tell you what your cost is are hugely important, because you know what the business is going to do next year, and then you have suspicions on what the business is going to do next year. So you have to build all that into your budget. And where most IT organizations fall down is they don't know what those knobs are, and therefore they don't know how they drive cost.
Right. So just so you know that we are working on that specific feature that you just mentioned. So the current feature is that we understand your past spending, let's say last 6 months, and we forecast it based on the past usage. But now we have this feature to collect the information from finance, marketing, infra, so that we have more context to forecast more accurately. So yeah, so I'll let you know once that's ready.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. So thank you for being the loyal customer of Octo. What would you say is the most feature that you guys use right now? Maybe it's different between you and the team members. So is it the the cost dashboard per cost group, or is it the intelligent reports? What do you
So,
guys use the most?
so in terms of what we look at on the day to day most, I would say it's probably cost groups, and then especially with the unit metrics.
Okay.
Those are hugely beneficial to us because we can break down things like our Redshift cost and say, oh, where is this going today? Whereas if you want to do that through AWS, you have to run some really obnoxious SQL queries against the admin account on the database itself. And then that it takes 30 minutes to get any info out of that. So Octo has been a huge time saver in that respect. I'd say, on the other hand, in terms of what's driven sort of the most value for us, it's recommendations. So Octo recommended us to purchase RI last year in December when we purchased those. And so we purchased RI based off of Octo's recommendations, and that actually has saved us something like, what is it? Maybe 4 million yen over the course of a year. So we're talking like major. Yeah, it's been huge. So I definitely we got our money's worth out, you know?
Okay. I'm so proud of my team now.
Yeah. You should
Okay.
tell
All right.
them.
All right. I'll tell them. All right. So optimization is a big theme, right? You mentioned about the rate optimization, but what are the some of the strategy that you've done, like right sizing, spot instances? What are the things that you guys are trying to do right now?
Yeah, so a lot of the more standard strategies that you would see employed don't really work for us because we're mainly serverless, right? So normally when you do a serverless workload, you're actually just specifying a number of virtual CPUs and memory, and then AWS will just kind of shove that onto whatever instance fits. And so like there's not really a right sizing instance there. Now we do have a lot of things where we're looking at sort of usage on the day to day or minute to minute, right? So, like, our metrics that we care about are a little bit more nuanced. Um, so, just as an example, one of the things we've been looking at really closely is compute capacity, and that's charged per minute. And so, we've been looking at that and figuring out, okay, we see that this is spiking at certain times of the day. How can we spread our workloads out to maybe get a bit more of an even spike? Because they'll spike your usage up for like a minute before and a minute after, even if you're only using that for 5 seconds or something like that, right? So the thing we've been doing is taking those metrics into account and spreading our workload out. One of the other things we've been doing is we realized that a lot of our costs were coming to us because of the way we were loading data. So we had
Mm,
processes that were locking tables before they could write data. And that's fine if you have one process doing it, but we had processes that were trying to write concurrently. So you had this table that was just locked for 28 minutes out of every 30. And so our cluster could just never spin down because it was just always in use all the time. And so Octo actually helped us realize that because we were saying, okay, hold on. Why is there so much usage here? Why is this one process consuming so many RPUs? And after we dug into that, we were able to get sort of an operational view of what it's doing. And we said, oh, hold on, it's doing locks. Well, no, we shouldn't do locks. So we turned off locking, and all of a sudden, the sort of resource usage of the cluster went right back down again, and life's been good. But we realized that again, thanks to the unit metrics, we realized that there were 3 or 4 processes that were consuming about 45% of our RPUs. And so, and we realized that all those were just kind of loading the same files, right? And we said, oh, well, if we batched these, it would be much faster. So we've
mm,
actually started implementing a process that takes Parquet files in S3, batches them into larger sort of loader files and then pushes them in, because we know that there's about an optimum size for what you need to load into Redshift. And we weren't sending files of that size. We were sending much smaller files most of the time. So we said, oh, well, if we batch these up in such a way that they could be loaded, then we'll actually use less resources overall. And if we use less resources, like, the cluster gets faster and it also gets cheaper. So those were two major benefits to us.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. So one of the classic tensions when it comes to cloud cost management is balancing speed and the cost, right? And how do you guys give your engineer the freedom to innovate while keeping the bill in check?
Yeah, that is a hard one. So I think part of it is just that we don't do this through automation. It's more of a process.
Okay.
So for
Governance.
us, yes, exactly. So we focus on a narrow stack. So instead of an engineer just going and saying, oh, I have a problem, well, here, let me choose this entirely new thing to solve it, we have sort of a set number of AWS services that we use. We say, oh, you're deploying an API, you use ECS. You're deploying an ETL, you use Dagster. You're trying to build some data warehouse, Redshift, right? So we've got sort of one tool to do a job, and that means that when we build around this tool, we can build in efficiencies that maybe you couldn't if every single engineer was just solving their singular problem in the way that was most efficient to them. So what this means is that each individual process might be a little bit less efficient, but overall, when you factor in the economies of scale involved, you actually get more out of it that way. But what that does mean is that when an engineer says, "Oh, I'd like to use this new technology," there's actually a review process that we've implemented where we say, well, all right, well, go show me how you plan to use this, and then show me what this is going to do instead of our current tech stack." And then we have a meeting about it and we discuss. And after that, okay, if it's good, then we go implement it, and we implement it across our entire ecosystem as well. One of the big things we did actually was we had originally planned to we actually originally weren't going to do APIs even. Like, that was an innovation from what we had been sort of tasked to do from Ireland. They're like, oh, you don't need APIs. No, we're just doing ETLs here. That's not important. So yeah, I was just saying that if we have everything on lambdas, then the auto scaling is going to kill us, right? That's a famous problem with lambdas, actually. Like, that's one of the reasons why the Amazon Prime, that's why they don't use lambdas, because the auto scaling just kills your costs. And so when we were deciding this, we had one of our engineers was like, oh, but just use lambdas. And one of our other engineers was like, no, we should have actual services deployed to containers. And that was the direction we went with. So I'd say this works pretty well. It does constrain the engineers a bit, because it means that they can't just go cowboy and build whatever their heart desires. But on the other hand, they have to be a bit more creative, and I think having some box to work in actually makes the work a little bit more interesting, because you have to think about it a bit more.
All right, thank you. So FinOps is all about maximizing your business value, right? Increasing your time to market. So I think you do the right thing, but still, I think most people, especially in Japan, think FinOps is all about cost savings, and it could slow down your innovation. So unfortunately, that's the status right now. Would you say that's the case right now?
Yeah, I think so. This country does sort of consider any sort of software development or IT to be a cost generator
Cost.
rather than, yeah, exactly. When in actuality, it should be better thought of as, I'd say, a way to surface opportunity costs.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned a little bit about your difficulty of doing forecasting, right? Forecasting costs. So your finance team trusts you and they don't ask you much questions, but I'm sure, right? They have to set the budget at a corporate level And if you go over our budget, then you're gonna be in trouble. So what would you say is the most difficult part of forecasting? You mentioned that the AWS give you this, but Octo give you a little bit more. What would you say is the most difficult thing about forecasting?
I'd say the most difficult part is figuring out which assumptions are going to be valid. So when you're making a forecast, you have data from, the current period, and then you're trying to use that data to suggest what the future is going to be like. And the issue that you have with that is you're assuming that the future is going to be like the present, just more so. And if you've got things that you've got planned for the coming year, and you say, "Oh, we are going to build this new system, and this new system is going to have costs associated with it. But this new system is going to replace a current system that also has costs associated with it." So, how do I choose what I'm going to forecast? Do I base that off of, the new system, but I don't even know how much the current system costs, right?
Yeah.
So being able to accurately forecast really comes down to being able to figure out, again, how much do each one of your components or systems actually cost you on the month to month? Because if you're going to replace one of them with something else, well, you can figure out how much that new thing's going to cost with the usage data from the current thing. But if you don't know how much the current things cost, you don't know what the forecast is going to be like, right? So at the end
Yeah.
of the day,
Yeah.
most people just kind of revert to using whatever AWS or Datadog or whoever says. Oh, your costs are going to be like this next year. Oh well, okay, I guess they are.
All right. So yeah, again, we're working on the feature. So I hope that's gonna help you with the forecasting. Besides that, looking ahead, what improvements or tool would make your life easier in managing cloud costs? It could be something that we can develop or something that you like from other third parties.
I think one of the biggest things for us is, again, going to be sort of disaggregating costs. That's going to be the first thing. Like, that's really for us the sort of foundational level. Because as soon as I can see, not just from like a given departmental level, but like from a project level, from a service level, from like a systems view level, even from like a regional level, like having a bunch of different ways to slice the cost is going to be important. And then once
Okay.
I have that, the next level is going to be, so what are the levers that we can pull to reduce the cost, right? So having recommendations built off of those, and I say, oh, we see that this EC2 is consistently using this amount of RAM, or it says it's using this amount of RAM, but we see really that it's only ever at 50%. You could cut this down. So having recommendations like those, and I know that's easier to do when you're running an EC2 instead of an ECS, but at the end of the day, it's still got metrics, right? So being able to figure out how much of my containers are being utilized versus how much I'm paying for is going to be very important, especially when we have more of them. Because we have Terraform, so it kind of means that I can just go type in 3 numbers, and all of a sudden I've got a new size of container. And it's not a big deal for me to go and change those. But the big deal comes when I don't know how much I'm using it over a given month, right? And then I'd say the next layer above that is reporting, because like this stuff means a lot to me, but to the business, like they don't care as much because they don't see how the numbers matter to them. But once we've got sort of the costs deaggregated and properly assigned, then we can build reports off of that say, oh, here's how much our shift desk cost last month. And then we can break that up per trade. Okay, maybe the shift desk put in, 10,000 trades. Okay, great. 10,000 trades, and they cost us, dollars. So that's 80 cents a trade, you know? And as soon as you have those metrics, then it becomes a lot easier for the business to factor that into their thinking. They can say, oh, I can make this trade and it'll net us 200 yen. It's going to cost us 100 yen just to make the trade. So is that really what I want to do here? And maybe it is because you've got some obligation, and maybe it's not. But having more information will help the business make better decisions overall. And that's kind of what we're looking at doing.
All right, great. So I think that was all my questions. So thank you very much for sharing your situation and the best practices. I'm sure our audiences, you can learn a lot from your experiences. So thank you very much. I think that was it. Would you like to say anything to our audience?
Yeah, I think so.
Any tip for them?
Yeah.
I think many of our listeners are, I think, they're still at the work phase of the maybe crawl phase of the FinOps still.
Yeah. Well, I'd say to them, like, the first thing you got to do is just get the data in, right? Like, it's just the baby step you take first. Like, you don't have to do everything. Like, going to IAC is a huge amount of work when you've already got existing infrastructure. But if you could just start by, setting up, just set up your Octo account, right? Like that's what we did. And like, to be fair, I knew that's what we were going to do from the start of this venture. And we built a lot of the tooling around that. But if you just start with it and you say, oh, here's what I've got, and you can look at your tagging and you can say, oh, okay, so this is what I could structure my cost groups around. And then once you do that, you could start playing with it, right? In a lot of ways, if you're not on IAC, it's even easier because you could just go through and do the click ops to change the stuff to get it where you want it to be. And then once you've got it there, then it's really easy to start visualizing your cost. And even if you've got a huge amount of stuff that's sort of shared and it goes into one big bucket, like you don't start with everything being perfect, right? So get something and say, well, look, this is what we know is true. Now we're going to start taking inferences based off of what we don't have concrete knowledge of and basing our costs on that. And you just kind of whittle it down. And as long as you just keep putting some effort into it, then you'll keep having good results. And I think a lot of people, especially in Japan, have this idea that they don't really want to take the first step because they're not going to do a good job of it. But I mean, like you kind of have to start somewhere, right? And even if you're not perfect at
fail.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So use Octo. That's a great advice, Ryan. Thank you for promoting Octo as well. I gotta buy you a beer.
I'll do the next time we barbecue. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ryan. So that's it for the episode 2 of the Alphaus podcast. All right. Thank you, guys. Bye bye.
Thanks.
And that's it for our episode. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Money in the Cloud. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Alphaus Inc. for more expert chats on turning cloud expenses into strategic investments. You can also catch this episode on Spotify, and we'd love for you to join our communities on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, Cloud Venturers.